All right, good evening, everybody. We are back online. Hopefully, you guys all had a wonderful, wonderful spring break. You got to go somewhere or do some things. I know for most of us, this class doesn't stop, unfortunately, for spring break, so it's always here. So glad to have you guys back at it. A few housekeeping notes. Number one, I know there's a few of you who have had trouble getting the book. Again, you do not have to have the ninth version of the book. I believe the eighth version is probably the most popular. You'll be fine with that version. Get it as fast as you can. Get caught up on those chapters. Number two, our first exam is coming up. The exam will open up on the 24th and it will close on the 27th at 11 p.m. So again, must have that exam done by 11 p.m. on the 27th. You also have discussion number two that is due this week. So check that syllabus. Make sure you're on top of all your assignments. I will have discussion one and two graded by the end of the week, and that exam will be graded and posted by next Monday, so you guys will know your grades. So we're into kind of our different market breakdowns, if you will. So, and we're going to talk about selling to the different markets from the standpoint of associations, corporate, and then everything else, which a lot of times gets referred to as SMRF. And we'll get into that more here in a little bit. Now, I am going to speed up these lectures. I've been told more than once that I tend to lecture too long on these chapters, that it's supposed to be a quick overview. If you want more details, you have the outlines, you have the book. So again, I want to make these lectures 20 minutes and just really hit on the important topics that you guys need to know. So I'm going to do my best to make these a little bit quicker, a little more succinct, get you guys on to other things. So getting into it, selling the association market. As far as association goes, guys, every occupation has an association, whether it's the medical field, whether it's the hospitality industry, sports marketing, auto laborers union 111, everybody has an association they can join. This is a humongous market for the hospitality industry and for hotels in particular. So when we talk about associations and their meeting types, now again, they can vary. You've got your smaller associations for more specific type industries. You have large ones. Again, we're talking about the medical industry, doctors, nurses, what have you. It's a tremendously large association. So again, take into account that we're going to kind of talk more about the bigger meetings, I believe. And again, these can all be smaller, but for most association meetings, just to give you some quick overview of what that meeting would look like. Typically, you're going to have a general session, and that means everybody coming together at once. Okay, so that could be a couple hundred, a couple thousand, a couple 10,000. It's a huge, huge part of the meeting. You'll then break into smaller sections. They could be education tracks. They could be everything from workshops to best practices, new technology in the industry, but they're going to break it down into things that are more specific to individuals and those skill sets. Workshops on the same line, and you're going to have your food functions, obviously. And food functions are going to go from lunch to dinner to receptions to afternoon and PM breaks. The other huge thing you typically have at the association is an exhibit show. And these are typically vendors who sell to the members of the association. So again, if you think the medical field, it could be pharmaceutical companies, it could be medical devices, it could be the people who make beds for hospitals, it could be people who make the cleaning supplies for hospitals. Again, the exhibits can go on forever because there usually is so much associated with any one industry. Now, when we look at the association meetings, some of the things we're going to take into account. Number one, associations typically want to go someplace that is attractive. And I say that because their members don't have to attend the meeting. This is them electing to go and find out more about their industry. So, you're not going to probably take the meeting to Anchorage, Alaska in the middle of January. You want to go someplace that's going to entice people to come there. Vegas, obviously, is a popular location. Anything with the perfect temperature, if you will. Your Miamis, your Orlandos, your Phoenixes. Somewhere in Texas, obviously not in the middle of summertime. The Midwest is great. Chicago, Indianapolis in the fall. Perfect spot. Go on the East Coast in the beginning of spring, late summer. So again, you have to have something that's going to attract the people there because they don't have to go. And so again, we need that extra incentive, obviously, to get them there. Sometimes it's geographically centered as well. An association, again, IMPI, Indianapolis Meeting Professionals International. Indiana Meeting Professionals International. We're based out of the state of Indiana. We're not going to have our state meeting in Ohio. Doesn't make any sense. We're going to take care of the vendors that are part of our industry. So sometimes you are landlocked geographically to a certain location, if you will, but some of your larger associations can go anywhere. East Coast, West Coast, international, domestic, what have you. So now, what kind of association meetings are we talking about? Well, You've got a variety. You've got your annual conventions. These are going to be on the very, very largest of scales. You're going to go down to your state and regional conventions, okay? Again, much smaller, probably within that state most likely, or if it's in a region, whatever that region entails. You can have just general conferences, and those could be anywhere, and they're just going to grab membership from that surrounding area, if you will. Seminars and workshops work much the same way. Board meetings are probably your planning meetings, and whether you have that at a national level, a local level, a state level, those typically will go just about anywhere. And it's a chance for the brain trust, if you will, of the association to get together, figure out, number one, where do they want this association to go? What are the hot topics that need to be discussed? Does it have to be done at a national? Can it be done at a workshop? Can it be something that's done in an email? They're kind of setting up what the association will do for its membership. So, as you look at different places, excuse me, as we look at these kind of meetings, there's a number of different things that come into play. Now, some of these meetings are so large, they have to be held at convention centers because hotels do not have the space. And that's the case. Now you're looking at, say, the city of Indianapolis. They're going to use a convention center, maybe 100,000 square feet of space. So what becomes an important piece of that? Well, their hotel rooms. They want them to be close. They would love to be attached. They would, again, love to have the shortest walk as all possible. Make sure inclement weather can't inhibit them getting to and from the conference. So, again, they're going to look at all of that and how a city can basically put on the convention. And a lot of these conventions are that big. I mean, talk about the National Rifle Association. That national convention came here, I want to say it was 2 years ago, and took over the entire city of Indianapolis. So, again, now all of a sudden we have a lot of things in play. We have the convention center and what it has to offer. We have the hotels and what their locations are. And do we have enough 3, 4, and 5-star hotels to meet the needs of this association? Or the flip-flop. Do we have enough affordable hotels? Maybe your 1 or your 3, 2, 1-star hotels that maybe are a little more discounted because this membership is more price sensitive, if you will. What else goes on in the city? Are there restaurants? Is there nightlife? Are there things to do when they're not in session? All of this will come into play when a city, a hotel, a convention center works on trying to get associations to come there and hold their conventions in their cities. Now, some of the characteristics of an association meeting, you're looking at a number of different things so the cycle. Associations, typically you're going to meet anywhere between, they'll meet annually, they can meet semi-annually, but as far as when those bids come out, typically they're 2 to 5 to even more years ahead. So my hotel might be bidding on a conference or a convention for 2022, 5 years out. So keep that in mind. When they do sites, excuse me guys, I'm fighting off a little bit of a cold. When they do site visits, it's not typically a typical site visit. Number one, they're probably encompassing more of a city. They're looking at the convention center. They're looking at 2 or 3 headquarter hotels, 2 or 3 overflow hotels. They're going to some of the different attractions of the area. Can they work out a deal for their attendees? Not to mention, it's not one planner that typically is involved in this. On the association level, you tend to have more committees. So let's break it down to a smaller one. Say you're trying to get a hold of a state convention, 250 attendees. It's a one hotel piece of business for most hotels in downtown Indianapolis. So my counterpart in my hotel is Patty Overton. She handles associations. She has to do the site tour for this particular association. They can have an entire committee, 8, 10, 12 people on the site tour. And now you're trying to listen to everybody as far as what points am I going to make? What are the highlights? What's important to everybody? Is there a group theme that they want A, B, and C? Does each individual have a different idea of what their key hotel is? Those site tours are incredibly difficult. They're usually longer. A lot more questions get asked. And definitely a different feel to them as opposed to the corporate market, which we'll talk to you about here in just a minute, which is typically a little more drilled down, a little more precise, if you will. So, and again, we talked about what this convention will look like. And we already said, number one, it's voluntary. It's not mandatory. Members don't have to come. They pay membership dues, and if they, want to come to the national convention or a local convention, they can, but they're not obligated to. The duration of these conferences, these conventions, can last maybe between 3 and 5 days. And so again, they can be long in the sense that there's a lot to go over. It can be quick, like a workshop or a breakout type session where maybe it's 1 or 2 days and it's just best practices. It could be an overview of the entire association and where it's going to be heading in the future. So a lot to cover. Excuse me, guys. The last thing, as far as one of the characteristics of these associations is going to be the price. And that's going to vary upon the association. So there are some associations, and again, we look back at a medical association, which you would assume would have money. Again, we're talking about individuals who are professionals making up a lot of times in the six figures. But you can have a teacher's convention. Now you got the opposite. These people don't usually make as much money. They're a little more budget conscious. So again, knowing the association allows us to kind of figure out some of these characteristics. Now, as far as the decision makers go, we kind of already touched on it, but I'll give you a few other examples. Besides having what could be a committee, the president of the association could be the only person that makes the decision. It stops with them. They could have an association director. There could be a third-party planner that plans for them. Could be a board of directors. You also have influencers. So if to hold association ABC, it has to be sponsored by their state association, their state chapter as well. So now that becomes something that you have to both influence the state chapter and make sure you impress the national decision maker as well. So it can get very convoluted very quickly. And really that's what I'm going to touch on right now for association business. So bear with me while I take another drink. Like I said, I'm fighting a cold here. All right, we're going to get into corporate, so in the corporate market, and that's a whole different animal into itself. The corporate market can have meetings for anything and everything. Imagine training, HR, best practices. We've got a new product that we're launching, and we got to make sure everyone's educated on it. We have a new product we're launching, and we want to make sure our clients are educated on it. It could be a state of the company address. It could be a social function where we're just entertaining clients. It could be a rewards dinner for all the top sales managers. Again, there are so many different reasons that corporations have meetings. It is absolutely hysterical. So, and again, the most important things with any meeting, and corporations are no different, we talk about obviously you've got to have an environment for them to be able to meet the goals they have set. So if it's a training session, is the room set up to do best for training, i.e., is it a quiet room? Is there enough space for everybody to work? Do we have the proper internet connection so that if they need to hop on the internet, they can? If it's more of a reception style, what's your food and beverage like? Is it high enough quality? Have they come in and done a taste test? Can you offer a premium bar package? So they're going to be looking at different things depending upon what the meeting is. Now, again, we talked about the kind of meetings. The book touches on a few more. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you these. We kind of touched on them. National and regional sales meetings, new product introduction, one of the ones we talked about, professional and technical meetings, management meetings. Could be departmental meeting. We're going to talk about where the marketing department is going in the future. Where is HR going to go in the future? Hey, we're adding 4 more elements. How does accounting take on these responsibilities? So it could be departmental, it could be manager, it could be training meetings, stockholder public meetings, incentive meetings. Those are the best ones. Because again, those usually rewards ones for individuals who have hit certain plateaus for the company and they're rewarded. A lot of those are taken care of at all-inclusive resorts or exotic locations because it's meant to be a reward. There might be small training aspect of it, but for the most part, it's we want to thank you for the monies you've generated. We're gonna reward you accordingly. So again, we talk about corporate meetings and as far as some of the characteristics goes, and guys, the book touches on all of this. I'm gonna glance over it real quickly. They can go from a meeting of 10 people to a meeting of well over 1,000 people. The book talks about 52% of the attendance is 100 or fewer, 67% have fewer than 50 attendees. Again, depends upon the city you're in, the kind of hotel you are. If you're in Las Vegas, chances are you're not getting meetings for 50 people. Those people are coming out there because they have millions of square feet of meeting space. Typically are taking on meetings that are in the hundreds, if not the thousands of people. So my particular hotel, we handle the whole gamut. Today I booked a meeting for 15 people. I'm working on another meeting that's going to have 250 people. So again, it's going to go all the way across the size, if you will. Time cycle, typically they're going to meet midweek. So a lot of times you're looking at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, out of there by Friday. They typically do not meet on the weekends. It's a rarity for the corporate market to meet on the weekends. Your lead time can be anywhere from a day. I've turned meetings around 24 hours. Typically, it's anywhere between 6 months and a year. A lot of corporate meetings get booked in the year for the year or maybe 1 year out. That's what I have seen in the most cases. Geographical patterns, there are none. Those guys can usually meet anywhere. They might try to meet near a plant or near a location. I've had a lot of companies when they've opened something in Indianapolis. They might have their regional meeting there because they're going to go out and look at the new plant. We've seen that with FedEx. Seen it with a number of other companies. It could be that they have a good client base in that particular area, and that's why they're meeting, because maybe part of the meeting is going to be go out and see clients. They may want to get out of their state altogether and don't care. I've had people come in from North Carolina, Indianapolis, because they like the city. It was easy to get into. They could walk everywhere. There was an element of community involvement, or there was an element of team building. They thought Indianapolis offered those kind of things. So again, there's a variety of reasons why they would want to come to your hotel. Attendance, the great thing about the corporate market is attendance typically is highly predictable. Most of the time, they have to go to this meeting. If this is a training session, you have to be there. If the marketing department is meeting to discuss what we're going to do in 2017, they all have to be there. There is very little, we're not sure how many are going to be attending this meeting. Now, where it gets tricky is if it's more of a meeting that they're inviting clientele to. Once again, they don't have to come. The clientele can be invited, they can be encouraged, they can be incentivized. They don't have to be there. But for the most part, the corporate world has a better grip probably on the attendance of their meetings and their needs for overnight rooms and those kind of things. The duration, again, much like the association market, it could be a day meeting, it can be 3 days, it can be 5 days. It just depends upon what it is they're discussing and how much information they have to go over. As far as exhibits go, you'll see less of this in the corporate market typically, especially if it's just a meeting about that particular company. They might have new products they want to exhibit. Maybe a vendor or two have come in. But unless it's a users conference, in which case maybe they've invited a ton of vendors, either who use their product or want to show examples of how they use it, we don't see as many exhibits. Now, as far as the requirements go for a meeting, and again, corporations, much like associations, will typically have your general session where everybody meets together. If it's a company-wide meeting where we're going to talk about, where the company is in 2016 and where we want to go in 2017, there's your general session. Then from there, we might break out into departments, and each departmental manager or director is going to talk to their departments about what their responsibilities are for helping the company reach the 2017 goals. So now you need breakout rooms. They're all going to come back together for lunch. That's going to be in another room. We're going to have afternoon breaks scattered throughout the meeting areas, and we're going to have a nightly reception with an award ceremony. That's a typical setup for any kind of corporate meeting. And again, they could go no meals, they could go all meals. It just depends on the corporation. As far as who plans these meetings, who your decision makers are, the beauty of the corporate world is a lot of times I get to see a lot more professional meeting planners, and the fact that third-party planners get involved. And we've touched on this a little bit. Helms Briscoe, Conference Direct, Experian, 3 of your largest, we call third-party planners. And really what they are independent consultants. So they work under the Helms Briscoe umbrella, but they're individuals who work on commission. They will go to these corporations and talk to them about how they would like to be the ones who plan their meetings when they arise. And by planning their meeting, typically they're going to source everything and help the decision maker at the corporate level lay out the meeting. So they might, if let's say I work for Helms Briscoe, they would call me up, Coca-Cola calls me up and says, JJ, we have a sales meeting, we want to go 3 days, here's the content, how do you think we should have this arranged? And I might sit down and look at it and say, well, you're going to want a general session on day 1 and day 2, we're going to want breakouts on day 2 and day 3, we're going to need meals on every day, and on day 3 we're going to have a closing reception, kind of a thank you to everybody who attended. So we put all that together in an RFP, request for proposal. It gets sent out to the hotels. It comes to me, I put my proposal together, I send it back to the third-party planner. What they're actually doing is they're going to source the meeting on behalf of the company. So they will do all the legwork. They will send out the lead. They will follow up with the hotels if there are questions. They'll push a little more if they think they want a better rate, or can they get more concessions added in. And then they're going to take the 2 or 3 best options, present it back to the decision maker of the company, give their recommendations. Decision maker makes the call. They'll call back to the hotel and say, yep, you've won it. Then what they're basically going to do is put the decision maker in connection with the hotel now, and they're going to start working on the details. In a lot of cases, sometimes the meeting planner will stay on and actually do the detailing of it as well. But the kicker of all this is the company doesn't pay a dime for this service. If you're a Helms Briscoe rep, you get 10% commission on every overnight room you book at the hotel, paid by me, the hotelier. So that company invested nothing to get that Helms Briscoe rep to plan their entire meeting, source the whole thing, and help really do all the busy work, all the leg work that it would take to plan these meetings. And for a local one, that's a good deal as it is. But if you're on a national scale and you're looking at 5 different cities and 4 different time periods and all that, it is an amazing amount of work that you could have one person do. You're not going to touch any of it, and you don't even have to pay them because the hotel is going to basically pay them the 10% commission is almost like a finder's fee. They brought me a piece of business. I'm going to pay them for that service, basically. So those are some of the people you're going to see when you talk about booking corporate business. You will have meeting planners that are full-time meeting planners that work for a company. They're wonderful to work with as well. A lot of times you work with administrative staff. That can be a little more tricky because, again, they're not usually as knowledgeable as a full-time planner, so there's a lot of education that goes on when dealing with them. You could deal directly with the director who's running the meeting, if you will, or even the company president. It just depends upon the structure of the hotel. I'm sorry, the structure of the company, excuse me. So, again, we talked about kind of who you would deal with. Typically, your decision maker is going to be either that director who's running the meeting or someone more higher up, the executive vice president, a VP, the president of the company. They will be the ones that actually sign off on everything. So, just some other things here to make sure we touch on everything. You know, the one thing I skipped over with associations, and I'll touch on it real briefly here for the corporate market. Where do you find this business? And that is kind of really the nuts and bolts of sales, is how do we go about finding the people who have meetings they want to hold? Well, there's 1,001 different ways. Most of us have good ties with our Convention Visitors Bureau, so we're going to get leads from those guys. As companies who are looking at Indianapolis, we will have leads come in from our global sales managers. And again, my company, Crown Plaza, falls under Intercontinental Hotel Group. So our global sales office, or GSOs, fall under Intercontinental Hotel Group. So somebody from Boeing might say, hey, we want to do a meeting in Indianapolis. Can you source all your hotels in the downtown area? And again, they almost use that global sales manager as a third-party consultant and basically have them shoot it all down to all of us. You could have 9 properties that all fall under the same flag. We send everything back up. They put it all in a nice report, send it to the client, and the client can pick through it. The other ways we're going to go about doing it, obviously, a lot of phone calls, guys. Prospecting. And again, we'll talk about that here in later chapters, but that is where, I'll say 75% of my time is spent trying to reach out to different clients. So we know the companies in our area. We know the companies in the state. We know the companies nationwide. We have different reports that tell us who's coming to town, and we call those companies all the time and try to find new and better contacts. Who's planning, who has something, who comes in the Indianapolis market. It's a constant reach out, whether it's by email, whether it's by voicemail, whether it's in person. If I can get them on the phone, get them in for a site tour, that whole element is huge to the sales process. So again, other ways that we can find business, obviously you can do Google searches. I've used LinkedIn, where again, I know said company is in my backyard, but I don't have a contact there. I can go to LinkedIn and say, give me all the admin employees for Siemens, and boom, there's all of a sudden 25 names. Now, I don't have their direct line, but I know the Siemens office has 2 locations in Indianapolis. I'm going to call those numbers and ask for that person and eventually get myself there. Obviously, referrals are huge. If we can get other of our clients to refer business our way, whether it's internal or external. And again, Google searches. We're always, like most companies, you're trying to take business from your competitors. So I can Google search Omni Meetings 2016 and see what companies listed on their website registration for said meeting at the Omni 7 in downtown Indianapolis. Again, I'm not going to get that meeting because they probably have already held it, but I know that company met in Indianapolis. I know they were right across the street from my property. It's worth me probably delving in and finding out more information and calling them. So again, that is done across the board. Association business, Smurf business, which we're going to get into here in a minute, or corporate business. So we'll touch all of those. So that kind of gets you quickly through the corporate market. I am still going way too long. It's going to be probably about 30 minutes, but we are covering 3 chapters, so I'm going to give myself a slight break there. A quick drink. And we're going to quickly get into the other markets, as the book calls them. A lot of times, it's funny, the book talks about non-for-profits, and that kind of a lot of times I think falls under the Smurf category. And for those of you who don't know, Smurf stands for Smurf, S-M-E-R-F, like the little blue creatures, except it's an acronym. It stands for social, military, education, religious, and fraternal. And the S sometimes will stand for social and sports. So in my world, and I think we've kind of discussed this briefly, I kind of am a weird hybrid. I handle corporate and sports. As you guys can probably tell from the video, I'm always wearing something that is sports apparel. You can see the basketballs behind me right now. I spent 10 years in college in professional athletics. I've got good ties there. I understand those markets very well. The hotel deemed that it would make perfect sense to let me work with that particular market. And so in our office, we have somebody who handles MRF, which is Smurf without the F. Or, sorry, without the S. So, again, when you get into the Smurf market, definitely very unique. Number one, you're dealing with a lot of different entities. You know, it can be sports or social. It can be the military, education, religious, fraternal. All these have their own nuances, and they're all very unique and very different. And we'll just touch on these real quickly. Social is what it sounds like. It's a social function. It could be a Christmas party. It could be a reception. It could be a gala. It could be a fundraiser. Sports, for the most part, are teams coming in either to play in tournaments, play other individual teams. Perfect example for Indianapolis is we have AAU tournaments. You've got Butler, IUPUI, Marion, University of Indianapolis. You have their opponents coming in. We always want those teams to stay with us. You have Big Ten women's basketball, Big Ten men's basketball, Big Ten football. We have national swim meets. We have, obviously, you're looking at NCAA tournament, women's Final Four, men's Final Four. We've hosted Super Bowls. You have the Colts coming. You have the Colts. You had Indy 11, which I'm proud to say we are the official hotel sponsor of the Indy 11. All visiting teams will stay with us or at Crown Plaza at the airport. You've got the Indy Fuel. You've got the Indianapolis Indians. You've got the Indiana Pacers. That all, all falls under the sports realm. So it's from professional to amateur, and it is a huge, huge market and a huge revenue stream for a lot of different hotels. Military can be both reunions, could be training sessions, could be troops coming back. They have to be kind of reintroduced back into their communities and society after having been on a tour of duty, kind of things they need to be aware of. It could be the same thing with the families. You know, hey, these guys are coming back. These guys and gals, are coming back. Here are combat situations they could have faced. Here are things maybe you should be aware of when we talk about post-PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, so that the families are aware of something that they could be suffering from. And just kind of an education session for both those troops coming back home and the people that are going to be coming back home too. Military unions, again, you're talking about groups from either different conflicts, different battalions, different units that want to get together on a yearly basis. Very unique. Now, when we talk about military, a lot of times we're talking about a very fixed income. Either it's set by the government, there's a set military rate or a government rate, or again, you're talking about retirees that have served in Korea, Vietnam. You know, we're not seeing as many World War II, World War I veterans. They're mostly have passed away by now. But you're going to start seeing reunions for the Iraqi War, Afghanistan, the fight against terrorism. So there's going to be different meetings. And again, a lot of times these gatherings are very, very budget sensitive because, again, they're all paying for it on their own. Family class reunions fall into the social aspect. Education meetings, again, much like the corporate market, can be for anything. It can be for best practices. It can be for continuing education for teachers. It could be, again, for product introduction if we're introducing new themes, new ideas into the classroom, new hard goods, new textbooks, new computers, what have you. There's always possibility for training. Education, for sure, very, very budget conscious. Okay, a lot of these, they are looking for the most inexpensive way to do their meetings correctly. So it doesn't mean you just lowball it and they take whatever you give them. They want a certain level of quality, but they also want a certain level of price. Religious meetings, again, same kind of thing. A lot of fixed incomes, if you will, a lot of retirees. Now, the one thing I found out with the Smurf market is because they're looking for more of a discounted rate, they're usually a little more flexible with their dates. They understand that coming to Indianapolis in the fall, you aren't going to get a good rate. It's the most popular time to be here. The temperature is perfect. The leaves are all changing. It's beautiful. You're not going to get $99 rates. However, you want to come back to Indianapolis in January, February, March, I guarantee you'll get $99 rates. They understand this. And they understand for their meetings, for the most part, they're inside meeting rooms, they're inside convention centers, they can entertain themselves. Yes, they want to enjoy the city, but that's not the key component. The key component for them is an affordable way for them to bring their group together. And they're usually known to be more flexible in that regard. Fraternal organizations, much the same way. Government agencies are a lot like military. They're locked into a certain price. Government agencies also you have to be very careful with. There are some things they can pay for, there's some things they can't. So don't be surprised if they say we can't have a meal unless you can somehow work it into the room rate, and then it's one lump sum. It doesn't show up as a meal. Again, typically they are looking for government rate. You have to be very careful with the concessions that you offer. It cannot look like they've taken some sort of gift, if you will. So that one's always very tricky to work with. But obviously, with all the government agencies that are out there, it's a huge, huge piece of the pie of the Smurf market, if you will. One other thing they talked about, and we kind of touched on it briefly in the corporate, was the incentives meetings. Again, these are the ones that are more fun. They are people who have won, whether it's sales contests, whether it's sales manager of the quarter, sales manager of the year. They've reached certain plateaus within their companies, their associations, their different organizations. These are more fun. And typically, they're exotic locations. They're all inclusive. The individual is not paying for anything. It's all being handled from the entity that's sending them. So definitely a lot of fun with that one. And probably on the flip side, a lot less budget conscious because they're trying to make sure that everything is top shelf to show how much they appreciate these individuals. And again, the leads are definitely found the same way that we talked about. Again, we're making phone calls. We're going to, other things we talked about. There's networking sessions. There's going to MPI. There's, again, working with the third-party planners to see who they're representing. There's working with the associations that these companies might be involved. These organizations might be involved with. And again, there's calling them. There's calling all the churches in Indianapolis and calling the Archdiocese of Indianapolis and calling, the different military institutes to find out what's going on. So that kind of is how we would attack the Smurf market. That is a quick overview, guys. And like I said, the outlines go into much better detail. The book goes into much more detail. But again, the idea is to keep these quick for you guys. It's a quick overview. Make sure we've touched on some things. I got this one in just under 32 minutes, it looks like, so I'm getting a little bit better. If you guys have questions, if you guys have concerns, that first test is coming up. If there's anything you need to talk about, you guys have my telephone number. You have my email address. I understand right now that my IUPUI address is glitching in some way, that it's not coming directly to me. Please respond to the emails I've sent you. That's probably the easiest way to get back to me. Or you guys also have my work email address, and I think you have my Gmail account as well. Feel free to email any of those. They will all get to me. Worst case scenario, you have to call my office, 317-236-7499, 236-7499. Call, ask, we'll get you guys taken care of, okay? Great week, guys. Good luck on that first test, and look forward to talking to you next week.